Annyeonghaseyo, ninth graders, and welcome to Weather and Climate 5. Today we're just going to talk about the weather. So our objectives for today, by the end of this class, I want you to be able to read a weather map, and I want you to be able to understand a weather forecast on the news. Our language objective will be able to explain weather to a friend. And actually, if you live in Minnesota, it's really important that you're able to talk about the weather. Minnesotans are notorious for talking about the weather. And when we say talk about the weather, I mean, yes, it means talking about the weather. Literally, it means talking about the weather. But usually it means talking about things that are unimportant and really don't have a lot of personal meaning. So Minnesotans, they're kind of cold and distant people, and so they are very good at talking about the weather. And I'll just go ahead and talk to all of you about the weather now. As you know, I went up to Bemidji, Minnesota last week so I could attend a training. And the weather up here is a little bit different than in the cities. When I got here, there was still a considerable amount of snow on the ground, and the lake near I'm with my sister's parents, so the lake near my sister's parents' house was still frozen over. And today the weather warmed up and the ice disappeared from the lake. And so this was what I was able to see today. I heard all of you are experiencing very nice, almost summer-like weather in the cities, and so I kind of wish I was there to experience the warm weather, but it's not too bad over here either. Okay, so let's jump into some keywords for today's lesson. There are a lot of them. So first keyword is meteorologist. This is just someone who studies the weather. Meteorologists are on the news all the time. So there you go, meteorologist. Our next keyword is temperature. Temperature is something all of you know. It's how hot or how cold the weather is. We measure temperature in Fahrenheit here in the United States, but the rest of the world uses Celsius. So I really encourage you to get familiar with temperature in Celsius. Next, wind speed and wind direction are two very important aspects of the weather. And you know, wind direction will change. You know, it can change just in the course of a day, but in general, when we talk about the prevailing winds, when we're here in Minnesota, the prevailing winds are from the west to the east, right? They're called the prevailing westerlies. Okay, we're going to be talking about clouds a little bit today. Clouds are really important to understand the weather. Precipitation, you should know what precipitation is. It's any kind of moisture that falls from the sky to the ground. So we're talking about rain, sleet, snow, or hail. Barometric pressure. Barometric pressure is just a very fancy term for air pressure. So as air pressure increases, usually the weather is colder because cold air is more dense, and so denser air has higher air pressure. Humidity. Humidity is another term. We'll talk a little bit. I've got a whole slide where we'll talk about humidity, but humidity essentially is how much moisture the air is holding. Next, warm front. Warm front is when it's just basically when warm air moves into an area. And cold front is the opposite. It's when cold air moves into an area. So let's go ahead and begin with our first slide. We're going to talk about types of clouds in the sky. And so there are endless categories of clouds, but basically there's kind of like four general, like really broad categories that we talk about when we're talking about clouds. So number one, stratus clouds. Stratus clouds are low gray clouds. They're usually like rain clouds, and this is an image of stratus clouds. So when we have cold air moving into an area, usually the area will be blanketed by these sort of low gray clouds in the sky. When we have stratus clouds in the sky, we can't really see any sunlight. It's usually really dark. Skies are gray. Next, cumulus clouds. When people think of clouds, or if you ask someone to draw a cloud, they'll probably draw a cumulus cloud, which are these puffy, pillowy white clouds. Sometimes cumulus clouds sort of band together to form a very scary looking gang, and those clouds are called nimbus clouds. And nimbus clouds are a collection of clouds that would look like this. And sometimes nimbus clouds form even larger collections of clouds, which are called cumulonimbus clouds is what I want to say it is. Anyways, those are the kind of clouds you have for tornadoes and really big thunderstorms. Our next set of clouds are cirrus clouds. And so cirrus clouds are these sort of feathery, high clouds up in the sky. When I showed you that picture of the lake here in Bemidji, as the sun was setting, it was a beautiful day, those were cirrus clouds. Cirrus clouds usually indicate warm air moving into an area. This is an image of cirrus clouds moving over an island. Next, let's talk about cold fronts. Cold fronts happen when a area of cold air moves into an area. So here we've got a picture of a cold front, and one thing you'll notice is that the cold front, as it moves in, it kind of forces the warm air upwards. And what this does is it creates kind of, I want to say, almost a D-shaped cloud. It sort of has a point and it curves in, and you can see these clouds move in slowly as the cold front moves into an area. And if you look for these types of clouds, you'll notice that they're kind of around all the time. I never knew about these types of clouds before I started teaching science. Once I started teaching science, I see them all the time. So here's an image of a cold front moving into an area, and you can just see like a very clear line where this wall of cold air is coming in and the clouds that are following behind it. So the opposite of a cold front is a warm front, and a warm front happens when you have warm air moving into an area. And so warm fronts, they look a little bit different than cold fronts, and this is simply because of the nature of hot air versus cold air. Hot air rises, and so a warm front is going to, as it pushes in, it's going to start rising, and it's going to generate moisture as it meets that cold air. And usually when you have a warm front, you'll have usually like a very mild, kind of a gentle rain, and then once that rain passes, then you'll have nice weather, warm weather moving into the area. And another characteristic of warm fronts are these sort of clouds that are really high in the sky, like cumulus clouds or cirrus clouds, or these would probably be called cirrocumulus clouds, since they're kind of like cumulus clouds, but they're higher in the sky. So a stationary front is an area where you have two air masses, a cold air mass and a warm air mass, and as they move towards each other, they kind of cancel each other out. They really can't pass by each other, and then that cold air and warm air kind of sits right next to each other for a long time, and moisture accumulates and you get rain. This is an image of a stationary front. And here are sort of the symbols that you'll see on a weather map to indicate the different types of fronts. So when you see these sort of red half moons, that indicates a warm front. Blue triangles indicate a cold front. There's another type of weather system called an occluded front. You know, I've actually never really seen that in the weather forecast, and when I tried to do some research on it, it really didn't make a lot of sense to me. And since I don't see it so much, and since I'm having trouble making heads or tails of occluded fronts, I decided we'd just skip it. And finally we have stationary front, which is what we're talking about now, and it's a mixture of these blue triangles and red half moons. So let's talk about humidity. As I mentioned earlier, humidity is a measure of how much water the air is holding. Now, humidity is a lot like wind chill. So if you remember talking about wind chill, even though the temperature is cold on some days, if the wind is blowing really hard, it'll feel much colder. And so too the same with humidity. If the weather is hot, if the air is holding lots of water, then it'll feel that much hotter. So if you have 2 days where the temperature is like 88 degrees, on one day it'll feel hot for sure, but you know, you can kind of bear it. On another day though, you'll be sweating. The sweat won't evaporate from your body. It'll just be collecting like all over, be kind of dripping down, maybe collecting on your neck, your armpits. I actually have it collect right at the bottom of my chest, like above my stomach. Anyways, when weather feels sticky, hot, and nasty, that's when the humidity is high. This is an image of a heat wave, a historic heat wave that hit Japan last year. And you know, because of global warming, the heat is only going to increase as time goes on. I just wanted to share a phenomenon something that happens in Korea when the weather gets hot. They have 3 days called the Boknar. Bok is like, I don't even know what I would translate Bok, but it's like sort of the 3 hottest days of summer. And so on these hot days, and for some people, not even on these hot days, on just any day, on any real hot day in Korea, people love to eat the hottest, spiciest food possible. So they'll order like these hot, spicy stews on a hot day. So you're already hot, you're sweating. They give you this bowl of boiling soup that's super spicy, and you watch people eat it, and they're sweating. They got sweat dripping from their body. They're dipping peppers in the pepper sauce, eating them, and like, to me, it just seems absolutely crazy. But in Korea, they have this phrase called ior chior. It kind of means fight fire with fire. And so people will subject themselves to really hot foods because they say after they're done eating, they feel very refreshed. To me, it kind of seems like you're increasing your suffering and you only feel cool because you've made yourself feel extremely hot. But nonetheless, this is a very popular idea in Korea. I'm kind of curious to hear from you about how Korean people try to beat the heat, because you are from a very hot place as well. Nonetheless, if you have any questions about the weather, feel free to contact me at sjkwok@sejongacademy.org. You can also contact Mr. O at any time as well. He's not recording these videos because he's just not physically here, but he's still with us, you know, in heart. His email is hoh1@sejongacademy.org. Finally, I have office hours every day from 9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. So you can hit me up then if you want to talk. Messenger is another good way to contact me as well, or you can just send me, like I said before, an email. So thank you. Hopefully we're ready to move on from weather and kind of talk about climate. And once we talk about climate, we'll be talking about climate change as well. Okay, take care. Have a good night. Peace.